Good morning, everybody. Welcome to yet another virtual meeting of Heritage Oakville. It's nice to see you all. There's a lot of you are not showing your faces. You're hiding, but I can see most of you. This is a meeting again that's put together with the assistance of all the technical support people, and I thank them for that. For those of you who are watching online, if you want to get the agenda so you can follow on with what we're doing, you can do that by going to oakville.ca, tabs Town Hall, Agendas and Minutes, and you can get all the materials that we've got. As usual, everybody knows you'll be muted during the presentations. If you want to speak, you wave your hands around, and if you're lucky, I might actually notice that. And then when I call you to speak, you can unmute yourself and ask your questions, and then we move on from there. I'm told that this meeting has to end at noon today. I don't see any reason why it would be a long meeting, but I've been wrong before. But anyway, we'll get the hook at noon. We have 4 discussion items and 1 information item today. And I'll remind everyone that we are an advisory committee and that any recommendations that we make today will go to Planning and Development Council for its meeting on Tuesday, December the 7th at 6:30 p.m. And anyone who wishes to delegate at that meeting to speak to any of these items should tell the clerk by noon the previous day. Madam Secretary, I'm looking at the board and I think everybody's here, so I don't think you've got any regrets.
Mr. Chairman, there are no regrets. Carrie Colburn may have to leave during part of the meeting for a brief time.
Got that. Now, we have a number of delegations and they're showing up on the screen. I wonder if the tech people could move the delegates box off screen until they're due to appear, because it's all right for me. I've got a big desktop here, but for those who are working off laptops, it's going to make it hard for them to see the members of the committee. So if that could happen, that would be helpful, please.
Mr. Chairman,
okay.
The delegates
Yes.
are brought into the meeting one at a time on each item as called.
That's right, Madam Secretary, but what I'm saying is they're showing up on my screen just now as boxes. So that means they're taking up space on the screen and cluttering smaller screens for other members, I guess. I don't know if any of you is having that problem.
Okay,
anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe it's the view.
Yep, okay, right. So are there any declarations of pecuniary interest with respect to any items before the committee today? Seeing none, we'll move right on. The next item is the confirmation of the minutes of our previous meeting, which were circulated. Councillor Duddick, are you giving me a motion to approve as circulated? Thank you. So is there any discussion on that motion to approve the minutes as circulated? Seeing none, are any opposed to the motion? Seeing none, the minutes are approved. Okay, the next item on the agenda is our first discussion item, and it is a permit application with respect to 68 to 70 Navy Street. And I think that's Sue. Good, I can see Sue. Good, off you go, Sue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The presentation is just loading up here as we're getting started. And so I'm going to take you through the heritage permit application for 68 to 70 Navy Street. So the picture on the screen is what this house currently looks like. It is somewhat hidden right now behind some fencing, but if you're in the neighborhood, you might have seen something like this lately, and I'll explain why. Next slide, please. So 68 to 70 Navy Street are 2 semi-detached houses located on Navy Street, just between William and Robinson Street. So they're right at the edge of the old Oakville Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. So hopefully, I think everyone will remember that we did see a heritage permit application for these 2 units last year in June of 2020. That was actually a revision to a previously approved heritage permit from 2017, which had expired. And so we had brought and there were some revisions to the design as well. And so we brought it back to the committee in June of 2020, and the heritage permit application was approved. So what we're looking at today is for a revision to that existing heritage permit approval. And that is specifically the removal of the front wall that you just saw in that photograph due to unforeseen, very significant structural issues. So the reason why the front wall is exposed is because work on the property has begun in accordance with their approved heritage permit. And what they were working on was redoing the foundation and refacing it with the lake stone taken from the old foundation walls. And they were in the process of tying the front wall system into the new foundation. And in order to do that, they had to remove the siding off of the wall. Next slide, please. And so when they took that siding off, they made a number of very interesting discoveries, which we're going to go through in a bit more detail here to show you the photographs after I give you the summary. So what we found out was that the original front wall of this house and likely the original remaining portions of the house was actually stacked plank construction rather than the expected typical wood stud construction. The exception was that there is a northern addition on 70 Navy Street, which was a later addition. I'm going to talk more about stacked plank in a little bit because it's actually very interesting. You could also see one of the historic cladding materials, which was a thin and relatively smooth stucco that was finished with fake mortar lines to mimic stone blocks. And we'll be able to see that in some of the photos. We can also see how badly the front wall has been compromised because the existing window openings were not original. And we knew that already, and they had permission to replace the windows because we knew they weren't original. However, when they were installed, however many years ago, their installers chopped into the original wall system in a rather haphazard manner, leaving something that is less than to be desired in terms of structural stability. Sections of the stacked plank have been removed to accommodate these various alterations over the years. And unfortunately, there is a very high degree of wood rot and deterioration in the remaining sections of stacked plank. So we're going to go through some photos now to look at those conditions. Next slide, please. So this is just a reminder, this is what the house looked at like. I think this is a photo from 2016, 2017, before the alterations were started. This was at a staff site visit. So this is what the house has looked like for many years, but it is also quite different from what its original historic configuration would have been, as we know now. Next slide, please. So with the front wall removed, you can see some very distinct and interesting patches of different types of construction materials over the years. And what kind of looks like plaster and lath, I think from this photo, is actually the sections of stacked plank. Next slide, please. So there's 2 photos here. So you can see on the left, that is actually a close-up photo of stacked plank construction where the boards were laid horizontally on top of each other and then finished in with a stucco or concrete parging material to give them additional structural stability. And as I said, I'll talk a little bit more about the interesting bits of stacked plank. It is a very unusual construction method, but one of the points of showing this photo is also to show you the deterioration of those stacked planks. In that middle section, you can actually kind of reach in and grab pieces of wood and just pull them out. They are that deteriorated. And then in the photo on the right side of the screen, again, you can see more of the stacked plank, but you can also see some of those different cutting and fitting and replacing with different types of wood sheathing and construction methods as the window shapes changed over the years. Next slide, please. So this is one of the better pictures you can see with that historic stucco application that I talked about, which has the kind of drawn on or painted on mortar lines to make the stucco appear more as though it was a dressed stone finish, which was, I guess, considered a bit more posh at the time. But it's an interesting reveal of what we think may not have been the original finish, but probably a finish from the early 1900s, just based on some of the, I guess, trying to link up the various construction methods, holes in the buildings, different types of cladding materials. That is our best guess, is that it's not original, but it is certainly historic and very interesting. Next slide, please. So this is, again, showing another close-up of the stacked plank with also the bottom beams, which unfortunately are also in pretty rough condition, experiencing quite a significant amount of wood rot. And this is, probably just due to moisture getting into those wall systems over the years. Possibly when some of the new doors and windows were installed, but it is a very old structure, and these things do unfortunately deteriorate when they are exposed to not ideal conditions. Next slide, please. That's just another cutaway there of the bottom beam that's resting on top of the newly dressed foundation. Next slide, please. And here we go. We have another shot of the stacked plank, deteriorated portions of the stacked plank, and then the various cuts for different windows and inserts into the building over the past 100 years or so. Next slide, please. Again, showing, the different cuts and sidings that have been used to infill the front wall as changes have been made to this building over the years. Next slide, please. And so this slide is just a reminder. This is what was approved in June of 2020. And so I have included this slide because I wanted to just ensure the committee that with the heritage permit recommendation that's going forward today, this is still what the committee will be receiving as an end product. There are no changes proposed to the approved design from June of 2020. So what is constructed on the site will look like this. It's just that the original heritage permit approval required the applicants to keep that front wall in place. The most of the rear and side walls have already been approved to be removed as part of those new additions, but this heritage permit is addressing the fact that they will have to completely rebuild that front wall, and so it will essentially appear as though as the entire house will be demolished and rebuilt. Because the original June 2020 heritage permit was the one that required that this front wall be retained and included into this new kind of new renovations and structures, and that is not possible now. So I just wanted to reinforce this is what's approved. It's not being questioned in terms of what the ultimate product will look like. It's just that more will be removed than what we had originally anticipated. Next slide, please. So stacked plank construction is actually a fairly rare method of historic construction. As I mentioned, it's a stacking of horizontal planks or boards, and essentially it forms a very solid wall of lumber. Typically, planks were staggered or spaced slightly apart that kind of formed keys, and then the coat of plaster was laid over top of them on the exterior to provide additional stability and to keep everything together. But this type of construction method was really only used in towns that had extremely productive sawmills during a very small period of a historic lumber boom. And so you can usually actually, if you don't have a date for these types of homes, you can usually date them then to the lumber boom period that the town was experiencing. At that time, in my previous life, when I worked for the city of Peterborough a long time ago, I dealt with several stacked plank homes that were constructed during the town's lumber boom, which was a very small period between, I think, like 1867 and 1870. So it is now considered relatively rare in Ontario because not only did the conditions have to be right for these types of homes to be built in the first place, but many of them were actually dismantled if they were known to be stacked plank, because you could reuse all of that lumber, the building components. Once the lumber boom ended and lumber prices rose, those walls were actually worth quite a bit of money, more than the house itself. And so, to the best of my knowledge, this is the first stacked plank building discovered in Oakville. It is likely that there are more. We do know that Oakville was experiencing a lumber boom in the late 1800s. However, like this building, these buildings can remain completely hidden because the interesting bits are underneath, the exterior wall system and hidden inside, under the interior plaster and lath or drywall. So it's possible that there are more, but we don't know that. There are actually quite a few in our neighboring municipality of Mississauga. Next slide, please. So when I was called out to the site by Rick Meteljan, who's the project agent, and I know he's here to help me answer any questions later on, after I finished kind of geeking out over how cool the stacked plank was from a heritage point of view, the next feeling you get is, oh no, because of the condition of it. And so when the work to remove the siding revealed what was underneath, they did have a structural engineer come in to do an assessment. And so the bullet points on the next two slides, they're shown in italics because they are taken directly from the letter that is attached as, I believe, Appendix B to this item in your agenda. And so it describes a number of the problems that you've really seen in those past slides of photos, that the modifications over time, have not treated this building well, and that in addition to the studs not being continuous from floor to ceiling anymore because of some of these new infills and the high degree of environmental deterioration, meaning the planks, studs, and timber sill beams are very rotted. The masonry parging is largely gone as well. And so their opinion is that the front wall has lost its structural integrity. Next slide, please. And so in order to actually complete the work on this house as was originally intended, once the foundation work was concluded and they were in the process of removing the front wall materials, they had a scaffolding company to come in to help them complete that work. And they actually refused to do work on the project due to the deterioration in structural issues with the front wall system. So they refused work due to the unsafe conditions, and the structural engineer agreed with that assessment. So it's the final paragraph here. It is our opinion, based on the visual observation and above described conditions, that this wall is not adequate to withstand the anticipated loads during construction and after the completion of the project. The wall is not structurally safe and must be demolished. Any intent of repair is impractical due to the degree of decay present in the lumber and the diversity of materials that comprise the wall assembly. So, it's bad news. Next slide, please. So whenever we get a heritage permit in, obviously we run it against the guidelines of the Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District. And that district plan states, as all of our all of our plans do, and general good heritage conservation advice is that distinguishing original characters or qualities of a structure shall not be destroyed. Removal or alteration of any historic material or distinctive architectural features should be avoided when possible. And so the front wall was originally planned to be retained in accordance with the HCD plan. However, we are now at a point where, based on the structural assessment, which as a layperson, I agree with, considering that I could go in and poke holes in the wall with my finger, it is not possible to repair or restore the wall. And so therefore, we do not oppose the removal of the front wall of these semi-detached homes. And we would also note that we would not require the new wall to be rebuilt in a stacked plank construction method due to the extremely high cost of lumber and the fact that the stacked plank construction would not be visible from the exterior or interior of the house in the end either. It wouldn't make sense. Next slide, please. So, while the discovery of the stacked plank construction is unusual and rare, the condition is very sadly extremely poor. And in recognition, though, that the stacked plank building is a very interesting and unique feature, we're recommending that the property owner enter into a heritage conservation easement to do two things. And one is to ensure that the property is fully documented before the stacked plank walls are fully removed. So they'll take the siding off the remaining building and do a full documentation of the construction of the building and try to piece together the story of the house. And then also that the construction and history of this property be commemorated in a plaque to be placed on the property following the completion of the renovations. At this point, this is commemoration, not conservation, because unfortunately, there are no materials that are suitable to conserve. Next slide, please. And so the staff recommendation before you today is that, again, that the permit be approved to remove the front wall, but that prior to this, they complete the heritage assessment report, they enter into a heritage easement agreement to ensure that we've got a commemoration of the history of the building. And then that we can take the easement off of title once that work is completed, and the typical heritage permit expiry of 2 years. So as I said, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I know that our chair was able to attend a site visit with me and can, I think, attest to the conditions that we're seeing on site. And Rick Meteljan, the project agent, is here to help me answer questions as well. Thank you.
Super, thank you, Sue. One of the great delights about being a member of this committee is just how much you learn. I mean, a number of years ago, I discovered balloon framing. Now I've discovered stack planking. And it's so nice to see the excitement with the professional staff when they discover something like that. So it's great to see you so involved in your job, Sue. I think for me, the most important, really interesting historically and so on, but as far as this sort of heritage aspect, that this picture that was in our package, which is on page 27, was key. In other words, nothing's changing. This will look exactly like it was intended to look when we gave it a heritage permit previously. And that was great reassurance. So has anyone got any questions of Sue? Anything you want to know about stacked planking? Councillor Gittings? Councillor Gittings, right, off you go, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I share your fascination with the building process and so on. And my question for staff is, how do we move this along? I see that the proponent will be completing a full heritage building assessment, and these things have to be done. I'm just thinking in terms of project timelines. Fall is gone and winter is in the air. Just wondering, can these be concurrent? Is there, how can we move that along? The work can continue.
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we're very sensitive to the fact that this project is taking, unfortunately, a lot longer than the property owner anticipated. And so It's staff's intention actually to begin a draft of the heritage easement agreement if the heritage permit is recommended for approval by the committee today. And so by the time it gets to council on December 4th, hopefully we'll have a pretty good draft ready to go that we can sign off with the owner almost immediately afterwards. I also know that I believe that Rick is already working on that heritage assessment report too in the background. So things are happening while we're waiting for the committee and council meeting dates, so that once we get the easement agreement in place, they can be off to the races with the removal, as long as they're getting that documentation completed. And so I'll certainly just double check with our legal staff to see if there's anything else that we can do to facilitate kind of the moving this along as fast as possible. But I think the easement agreement will be a relatively straightforward document to put together. And if we can have that ready to go by the time council takes a look at this and gives it its final sign off, we should hopefully not be holding them up too much longer.
Greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think it's December 7th, the council meeting, Sue. I think you said
Yes.
4.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right, does anyone have any other questions of Sue? Okay, Rick, do you want to give us any comments and further insights into the excitements of stacked plank construction? If you unmute yourself, Rick, we don't need to see you, but it's quite nice if we can. Where did Rick go? I think we lost Rick.
No, actually,
You're there, Nick. You've reappeared.
am I back now? Okay. I can see my name. I can't see my face, but I'm here. So I guess I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, thank you to Sue for the excellent presentation, and thank you to both Sue and Drew for coming out to the site that day. Yeah, this is certainly very interesting. As Sue mentioned, there are a few of these in Mississauga. In fact, this is the 4th one of these that I've worked on. The other 3 have been in Mississauga, and they're all up in the old Meadowvale part of Mississauga, which, as Sue indicated, there was a mill there. There was a boom there, and I think there's probably up there. There's probably 20 or 22 or something houses that are still existing that are stacked plank houses. But this is the first one I've ever seen outside of Mississauga, and that follows the first one in Oakville. And it was very interesting to uncover it. As Sue indicated, the condition of the wall though is such that there really is no hope of maintaining it. But we thank you for your interest. We hope that you'll support the proposal that's before you. And we'll just point out that one of the good things about the project so far, though, is that, and if you've had a chance to go by and peek through the fence, you'll see this, that we have completed the work on the front wall, and it actually looks really, really good. The mason did an excellent job of refacing that wall using the existing stone or the heritage stones, and it looks great. So yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions and would ask for your support. And once again, thanks to Sue and Drew for coming by.
Thank you, Rick. It was really interesting.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So any questions of Rick? Okay, no further questions. We're now confined to the board. Any discussion on this matter? Nope. Yep, good. It's really just a technical issue, but it's a significant change because the wall's coming down, but it's a technical issue. But it was really interesting. Okay, so if there's no discussion, has somebody going to give me a motion? Councillor Gittings, that's a motion to approve the staff recommendation. Yes. Any further discussion on that motion? Motion is before you. Are there any opposed to the motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. So thank you again, Sue. And Rick. Rick, you can hang about, but you're free to go now.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is item 4.2, which is a heritage application for 417 Union Street. And it's Carolyn who will take us through this one. And she'll explain to us the nature of the application. This is not, we've already approved this this house, this construction, but the applicant wants to make some changes to it, and the staff feels the changes are significant enough that they should come back to the committee rather than be approved at the staff level. So Carolyn, off you go and take us through this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've got the presentation coming up. So you're correct. The committee has seen this application before in terms of the new building being proposed on the site. So this is the property. The house is now actually gone and there's a new foundation being constructed. So they have started construction for the new house. We'll go to the next slide. It's located in the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District and is a non-contributing property, which is why they were permitted to demolish the previous house and construct a new one. Next slide. So again, the property contains the house currently under construction. The owners, since having their original approval in 2017, have made some changes. The firstly was in 2019, they made some minor changes to some of the cladding and window designs. And again, because it was a new house, a non-contributing property, and those changes were considered fairly minor, they were delegated to staff for approval. And so those drawings from 2017 and 2019 are included in your package. And today the owners have come back again. They've actually decided through this time, I think things were pushed back a little bit due to COVID, and they've had some change of heart in terms of the overall design and would like to make the look of and feel of the house a little bit more contemporary and streamlined and remove some of the detailing that they had in the previous designs. So you can see in your package the drawings for 2019, and I'll show them in the presentation as well. But generally the changes being proposed to the 2019 design include a change in cladding materials, a change in some of the roof design of dormers, the dormers and the front porch, a change in some of the roofing materials on the dormers. The window and door designs are a bit different as well. And lastly, the trimwork and paneling have changed. Next slide, please. So comparing 2019 on the top and 2021 on the bottom, you can see that the cladding has changed from a mix of board and batten and wood shingles rather, to just board and batten. On the bottom, the stone that was approved previously, which is a natural stone, is actually still the same. So that's not part of this application today. Other changes include the designs of the windows and doors. And you can see the front porch has a different roof. The gable roof has been taken out. And so it's a smaller flat roof portico over the front door. And some of the dormers have changed in terms of the roof line. You can see on the far right, the previous one on the side of the house was a gable, and it's been changed to a hip roof. And some of the details in terms of the gables, the brackets, trim work have been simplified on the new design. But the overall footprint and layout and height of the house remains the same. So those are not things we're looking at to approve today or recommend for approval. Those are already part of their 2019 approval. So today we're just looking at changes to the windows, cladding, and the other details. Next slide, please. Take you to the rear elevation. So again, simplification in terms of the cladding. They previously had a mix of stone and wood shingles and wood siding, and a change in the windows. They're looking for more simplified windows. Again, this is pretty common on the rear elevation where we see larger sections of glazing for the rear yard. So that's a change as well. And you can see on the dormers, there is a change from asphalt shingles to standing seam metal roofs, which is also pretty consistent. And we've approved that in the 1st and 2nd Street District as well. Next slide. So looking at the side elevation, again, the overall structure is the same. We're just looking at changes in the cladding and in the window designs. And you can see the front porch now is a smaller sort of flat roof portico rather than the larger gable porch that was there before. You can see that on the left side of this drawing. Next slide, please. And the other side elevation, again, the chimney is still there. Roof line's the same, it's just a change in the materials and the windows as well. Next slide, please. So again, there are no changes to the footprint layout, the massing, the height, those all remain the same. There is no removal of heritage attributes, again, because this is a new home and a non-contributing property. The overall application is to simplify the design elements, materials of the proposed new house. The house still has the traditional form with the gable roofs, and the materials are still traditional in terms of the wood, board, and batten, but they've been redone in a more contemporary application with the changes to the roof line, or to the trim work and to the windows. Next slide, please. So staff recommendation is to approve the application subject to the final details on the cladding, windows, and doors being submitted to Heritage Planning staff for final approval. And I would actually like to add in a second condition here. There were some changes to the front elevations, and we haven't done the final calculation on the amount of glazing being proposed on the front elevation. And in accordance with the Heritage Conservation District plan for this district, the glazing on the front elevation needs to be less than 35% of the wall. So, Mr. Chair, I do have a recommendation that we add in a second condition, and that is that the glazing on the front elevation be minimized if necessary to ensure the glazing is less than 35% of the wall. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and I can go back to any other slides if the committee members would like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Is it possible for that change to be made to the document that we're able to see? Can the secretary do that, or if you can't do it remotely? It doesn't
Yes.
matter. I think we can probably retain the words, but it does help if we can see it when we get to it. So if there's anything you can do about that, in the meantime, I would ask you if you could.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm not able to do it from my end. I had actually done the presentation, but I guess the one that's up was already up before the changes are made. So I've made the changes for the clerk on our drive in terms of our documents, but I can repeat it again. And I can say it now again, just to repeat, but hopefully I can help the clerk put it all together. So the condition would be a second condition that would say B, that the glazing on the front elevation be minimized if necessary to ensure the glazing is less than 35% of the wall. And again, I think it's close to that, but we just need to make sure it's in keeping with the district plans. We'll do those calculations again to ensure that.
Good, as long as the clerk has that, so that keeps it clear. Okay, super, Carolyn. Any questions of Carolyn? Nope. Now, do we have somebody from the applicant? I see down here Curtis Van Kulen, but of the many names that are on my screen of people in waiting, I'm not sure if that name is showing. Is there somebody wishing to speak to us with respect to the application, Madam Secretary? I see Curtis has appeared. You need to unmute yourself, Curtis. There you go.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's just Curtis on this item.
Good, I've got you. I can see you now, Curtis. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, you've heard the presentation. Have you anything that you wish to add?
No, I don't. I think the presentation was really well presented. If there's any clarifications or questions of the board, I would surely be gladly able to answer all those questions, anything you need.
Okay, good. Are there any questions then of Mr. Van Kulen? Oh, seeing none. Good. Okay, so just stand by. Okay, we're confined to the board now. Any discussion on the presentations that you've seen in the application? Okay. Does anyone wish to give me a motion? Thank you, George. And the motion was amended, as you saw, and it was to ensure that the glazing, it doesn't exceed 35%. The clerk has the actual wording. Is there any further discussion? Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. The application is approved, subject to Planning and Development Council on December the 7th. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Curtis. Okay, the next item is item 4.3, 17 Lambert Common, and I think that's David.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just wait for the presentation for 17 Lambert Common to pop up. So this is a heritage permit application for the rehabilitation of the Lambert Smythe Estate Home. And I think it's about to show up here. There we go. Yeah, so there's the picture of the front elevation of the home. If we can flip to the next slide, please. So the property is located just north of the shore of Lake Ontario, south of Lakeshore Road West, and east of Birch Hill Lane. Next slide, please. It was the Lambert Smythe property and its estate grounds were designated back in 2010 under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The house on the property is a 2.5-story brick home designed in Neo-Georgian and English arts and crafts styles, and also exhibits influences of 1930s features, including its windows. So it was built in the mid-1930s for Sydney and Mary Lambert on estate grounds that extended all the way to Lake Ontario. The property was later purchased by Fred Smythe in 1954, who was the president of Avro Aircraft, who were under the program for the Avro Aero, as you probably remember. So the house has not been inhabited as a residence since 2009. Its most recent use was as a sales office for the surrounding homes in a subdivision, which began in 2013. And since the house has not been inhabited for many years, it also hasn't received really any maintenance for quite some time. And so it does need quite a bit of work, which is essentially what this heritage permit application is for. So the new owners, they're brand new to owning a heritage home, and they're finding all about all the lovely features of working with the heritage home. But they have been very receptive to working with staff to get the proposal to where it currently is today. So they're looking to rehabilitate the property in order to make it their primary home, and while also being committed to conserving its defining cultural heritage attributes. So essentially, there's quite a few works involved in the permit. Number one is the restoration of the metal outer windows, the wood sills and frames, and replacement of inner wood windows in kind. The restoration of the metal handrail and porch covering at the front entrance. The replacement of all doors on each elevation with new doors to match the existing. The replacement of the metal garage door with a new door. The addition of a new railing over the garage. The restoration of the copper drains and flashing, and finally the removal of the rear yard greenhouse structure. And additionally, a window condition assessment report by KSA Architectural Solutions was submitted in accordance with the town's window replacement guidelines. Next slide, please. So again, here's a picture of the front elevation showing the front entrance. Next slide, please. And again, the front entrance is from a little bit further east on the property. Next slide, please. And again, the front entrance, this shows the secondary entrance, basically the east entrance, so not the primary entrance, but I guess it was in the past may have been a servant's entrance. And just to the left, on the left-hand side of that photo is the garage wing on the east side. Next slide, please. Again, this is the east elevation. Shows the current garage door, which is a metal door. Just above that, what you can't really see from the photo is the doorway that extends onto the flat roof of the garage. So part of the proposal is to put a railing on the top of that flat roof in order for safety purposes. Next slide, please. Image of the rear of the home, and you can see the greenhouse, the small greenhouse on the right-hand side that's abutting the east garage wing. And next slide, please. And one more photo of the rear, and you can see the two bay windows there, and these provide the historic sight lines to the Lake Ontario waterfront. And next slide, please. And finally, the west elevation of the home. Next slide, please. And just one more image. This is taken from just north of Lake Ontario. So it shows the sight line to the rear of the Lambert Smythe house through the subdivision. So the view of the home is still preserved. And that's an essential heritage quality of the home. Next slide, please. And just moving on to the elevation supplied to illustrate the proposal. On the front elevation, there are 13 windows to be rehabilitated, 2 doors to be replaced to match the existing, and the main entry porch covering and metal railing are to be restored. On the rear elevation, there are 16 windows to be rehabilitated and 6 doors that will be replaced in kind. There are 2 doors into the garage wing, 2 that lead to the basement within the glass covered vestibule. That's just to the right of the middle bay window. And then there's the main rear entry door. And then just to the side, which you can't see in this elevation, there's a door that goes into the middle bay window projection area as well. Next slide, please. Moving to the east elevation, so there you can see the railing on top of the garage. So that's proposed to be a glass railing with black aluminum framing. So it's clear, so you still be able to see the brick of the home and the chimney. And there's there's two windows to be replaced, and the garage door to be replaced as well. And on the west elevation, there are 4 windows that will be rehabilitated. Next slide, please. So in terms of the windows, this is the main component of this heritage permit. Just due to their sheer number and how critical they are to the appearance of the home. So the windows consist of a combined assembly casement. So there's an outward opening steel exterior casement, as well as an inward opening wood single glazed casement. So the exterior steel casements really are the character defining elements of the windows themselves. It's very rare to see steel windows on a residential home. Additionally, they're the windows that actually contain all the design features. So all the muntin bars are only on the steel windows, whereas the inner wood windows are just plain single lights. So they don't contain any design features such as muntin bars. And finally, a window condition assessment report by KSA was submitted that met the town's requirements for the window replacement guidelines. The windows were assessed to be in poor to fair condition, and the report's recommendation was that either an in-kind replacement or a combined restoration replacement approach would be appropriate, and the latter approach is what is being followed here. Next slide, please. So in terms of the rehabilitation, the owners have committed to restoring, again, all the outer steel casements, along with the wood sills and trim, and to replace the interior wood casements in kind with new wood windows. The goal of this approach is to preserve the character-defining appearance of the metal windows and the sense of dimensionality that comes with a combined steel and wood window assembly. And further, the steel windows will function basically as the storm windows, while the new inner wood windows will provide the improved thermal performance for the home. Next slide, please. Now moving to the doors. So again, all doors will be replaced in kind for the most part. So here you see here the front entrance on the left-hand side. There's a screen door and then the main door on the right photo. The main door is actually not original to the home, as we can see from older historical photographs. It is in fact a steel door as well. So the replacement door will be a wood door that matches the same paneled appearance as the existing. And the lower right-hand side of that slide shows the replacement doors. So while the proposal does involve the replacement of the doors, the defining character of the main entrances on both the front and the rear facades will be preserved. So this consists of the transom over the front entry door and the fan light and side light on the main rear entrance. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you can see a photo of the main rear entrance in the bottom right. And so that's the essential form of that door will be preserved, including the door to replace the existing door will also match the current profile of the existing door. The rear doors are not great shape. They're made of wood. They all show a little bit of decay and some warping as well. Multiple doors in the rear elevation also are missing hardware and some glass panes. Next slide, please. So this is just an image showing the proposed garage door. So it's very similar in appearance to the existing door. However, there is a horizontal row of windows along the top of the door. You can also see the proposed replacement second story door, the lower right sort of snippet there shows what the intended door will look like. Next slide, please. Moving on to the main entry and the front porch. So the front porch covering is made up of 2 steel posts with a wood curved roof and narrow wood pilasters that are inset into the front wall. There is a metal handrail that extends along both sides of the porch with a curved design. And so the proposal includes the restoration of the limited wood rod along the outer trim of the roof and pilasters, and the restoration of the corroded elements of the railing. Next slide, please. And so here are some images of the railing, which is really beautiful. It's very unique as well, and kind of gives the home a little bit of the modernist flair that was mentioned in the designation bylaw. And this is to be repaired. Next slide, please. Moving to the greenhouse. So the proposal includes the removal of the small greenhouse that abuts the garage on the east side, the rear part of the east side. It's about 154 square feet in area, and it's constructed of a steel frame with glass panes and a concrete base. It does not appear to be original to the home. And we know it was added at least by 1962, however. We don't have a date of when it was added. But however, it's not very well integrated into the rear of the home. The actual frame, it cuts across the top corners of the windows that are on the rear part of the wall. And if you change to the next slide, please, you can see, so there's a image on the right that shows where the frame cuts along the top of the corners of the windows, and also image on the left showing the interior. We can also see that it looks like it was sort of haphazardly placed over the rear wall. So the proposed removal of the greenhouse will be able to expose the original door and the side lights of the rear wing, and it's not expected to have a significant negative impact to the heritage value of the property. Next slide, please. And just a few photos. This is a photo of the southwest side of the greenhouse. Next slide, please. A photo from the showing the east side. And next slide, please. And yeah, moving to the staff recommendations. The staff recommendation is that the heritage permits for the rehabilitation of the exterior of the Lambert's My Estate House and the removal of the attached greenhouse at 17 Lambert Common be approved, subject to the following condition: that final details on the windows, doors, garage door, new railings, and paint colors be submitted to heritage planning staff for final approval, that the permits expire 2 days from the final approval date by council, and that notice of council's decision to consent to the removal of heritage attributes be published in the local newspaper in accordance to section 34, 4.2 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And this last note is because of the changes to the Ontario Heritage Act that came into effect this past July, which requires public notice of council's decision on the removal of any structure or heritage attribute of the property. And so that concludes my presentation. We do have the applicants for the owners, and I believe the owners are also on hand as well. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And I'm sure the applicants and or the owners can answer questions as well. Thank you.
Super, thank you, David. And it would expire 2 years after the approval. I think you said 2 days. That would be quite swift.
Oh, yes, 2 years, sorry.
Yeah, an excellent report, David. On page 1 of what I'm looking at, page 69 of the package, under key facts, the second bullet, you talk about the installment of a new railing. I think you meant installation. And when you use the word installment, you use the American spelling.
Oh,
so that kind of shook me before I got into the details of the report. So I thought I would point that. So I do read the stuff.
my apologies.
Yeah. So an excellent report. Just one thing, David, when I was at the property, and I see it again in these pictures, there's a lot of trees and bushes that are right bang up against the house. Is there any intention to remove some of these, because they seem awfully close to the structure, and I'm sure they must be doing things to the foundation?
Yes, there is actually. For the two cedars that you saw on the first image on the front, they're right by the foundation of the home. There's one on either side of the front entrance. They will actually be removed and replaced with smaller cedars, which are more in line of what the original design intent was. Because right now, their height far exceeds the height of the home. They actually, at the beginning, I thought they were actually listed as heritage attributes in the bylaw, but they're actually not. They're different trees that were listed as attributes in the bylaw. So that's why I did not include it in my presentation,
Yeah.
because they weren't listed as attributes, but they will be removed for smaller trees.
Yeah, I would expect so. Okay, any questions of David? Yes, Sue.
Hi, this isn't in the list of things that are in part of the project, but I'm sort of wondering about the roof. It looks pretty rough, and do I understand correctly that it's actually wooden shingles or wooden roof? So I'm just wondering if that's going to come along at a later date, or if the assessment of the roof has been that it's in better condition than it looks from, standing down below.
Yeah, that's a good question. We've actually issued a minor heritage permit for the replacement of the shingles already. So they have, it will be EnviroShake shingles, but they do replicate the appearance of the existing shingles, cedar shingles. So, and being by Lake Ontario, they're subject to quite a bit of wear and tear. So that permit has already been issued, and so they've looked at that part of the proposal, because that was more of the simpler stuff, and we worked with the owners over time to sort out something that's appropriate for the windows, and a solution that they can live with, because it is going to be their home, and something that preserves the primary character defining features of the windows. And so that's what we've got right now.
Yeah, no, that's great. I just wondered about the roof. Thanks for your answer. Yeah, I get it. Thanks.
Yeah, and I guess you moved on that, David, to protect the integrity of the building, because the roof is in bad shape and could have been leaking. Yeah. Okay, good.
Exactly.
Any other questions? Nope. Now, you indicated that I've still got an awful lot of names on my screen. I've got Tomi Daramola is listed.
So Tomi's the applicant.
Okay, and is it Ahmed
and Zainab.
Bungo?
Ahmed and Zainab are the owners.
And Zainab, okay. So does anyone wish to speak on behalf of the applicant? If you do, unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Tomi. How are you?
Hi, Tomi.
Hi. Yes.
I think we met on site.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything you wish to add to David's presentation?
Well, first let me say thank you for listening to the presentation on the proposed refurbishment and changes that we have for the building. And David, thank you for an excellent presentation. You captured everything that we're proposing, and it's been a pleasure working with you so far. I don't have much to add to David's presentation. However, I am here to answer any questions that you have and any concerns that you wish to express.
Okay, thank you, Tomi. Are there any questions of Tomi? No, good. Okay, thank you, Tomi. Councillor Duddick?
Mr. Chair, I'd be pleased to give you a motion to approve the application as per the report.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a very full report, and it's a good report. I think it tells us the windows are the really big feature, and I have to say that by the time I'd finished reading the KSA report, I had an acute attack of fenestritis. It's all about the windows. Anyway, okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion around that motion? Any other comments or questions that people want to make? Jerry?
I just wanted to say that this is such a positive story, and a great appreciation both to staff for an excellent report and to the owners and their agents for bringing together a really wonderful restoration plan for this house with all its lovely eclectic details of steel windows, steel railings, and steel columns, many details of which we haven't seen with this much concentration before. So a big round of applause to the applicants and to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. Right, any further discussion? Okay, the motion is on the floor. Are there any opposed to that motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Thank you very much, everybody, for that. Okay, the next item on the agenda, 4.4, is the motion notice of intention to designate 4243 6th line. And is that you again, David, and Susan as well, perhaps?
Yes, that's me. I think Susan's okay to sit and relax
Good.
for now, hopefully.
Anyway, off you go.
Yes, so I'll just wait for that to the presentation to load as well. So yes, there it is. So this application is for the property known as the Glen Clare Farm, also known as the bigger farm, at 4243 6th line. And the proposal essentially involves three components. So it's the designation of the 1898 farmhouse, which you see the images there. The removal of the property from further implementation of from the cultural heritage landscape strategy, and the removal of the remaining non-heritage farm buildings on the property. Next slide, please. So the property is located just on the east side of 6th line, just south of Highway 407. Next slide, please. So there's quite an extensive background to this property. It was first listed on the register in 2009 for its potential heritage value as a historic farmstead, which included the brick farmhouse and the agricultural buildings. So it was non-designated. In 2017, council had recognized the subject property as a significant cultural heritage landscape as part of the phase 2 of the cultural heritage landscape strategy, and directed staff to proceed to stage 3 of the implementation of protection measures. However, sadly, in 2020, a fire burns the main prominent bank barn on the property, as well as a large wooden drive shed as well. And luckily, at least, the house was not affected by the fire. But even before the fire, I believe in 2018, an unapproved deposit of fill was added to the property, and that surrounded the agricultural buildings and pathways that connected the buildings and towards the house, and along the access pathway to the a communications tower that's also on the property. So the property owner, which is Bell Mobility, retained the heritage consultants at Stantec to complete a heritage impact assessment to review the condition of the property and to reevaluate the property's heritage value, both as a cultural heritage landscape and for its original structure, and for its individual structures, given the impact from the changes that occurred on the property since 2017. So this HIA was completed in October 2021 and is attached as Appendix B to the staff report and the agenda package. So the remaining structures on the property include the 1898 brick farmhouse, a Bell Mobility communications tower, and farm-related outbuildings that include the damaged ruins of the former timber bank barn and its silos, a contemporary aluminum-clad cold storage and store building, and a mid-20th century concrete block milk house. And the property is currently vacant and has been secured by the owner. Also, the applicant has submitted a notice of intention to demolish to remove the remaining farm buildings. This is because the property remains on the Heritage Register as a non-designated property. And finally, the application to demolish the remaining farm buildings must be addressed by council by December 28th, 2021. Next slide, please. So here are a few historic photos of the property. Sort of sad to look at it now, but it gives you a sense of what was there over time. The top left photo is the former bank barn. We can see, you can just get a sense of its prominence from that photo. The top right, you can see in the background, there is the wooden drive shed on the right-hand side of that photo, as well as some turkeys in the foreground. The bottom left shows the 1898 brick farmhouse and its original porch, which unfortunately, is not there anymore. And in the bottom right, you see the Glen Clare Farm branded farm truck. Next slide, please. So the Stantec heritage impact assessment examined the integrity of the features that had been previously identified in 2017 as contributing to the property's the cultural heritage landscape's value. It also evaluated the cultural heritage landscape's heritage value according to the criteria in Ontario Regulation 906. So the question posed was, is the property still, does it remain an intact cultural heritage landscape? And in short, the answer is no. The property no longer meets the criteria of Ontario Regulation 906 as a significant cultural heritage landscape. It was determined that the loss of the timber bank barn and drive shed significantly reduced the legibility of the property as an agricultural landscape, as these were the key structures that defined the property as a cultural heritage landscape. Additionally, the associative and contextual value of the property as an agricultural landscape has been severely diminished from the addition of fill, from the removal of fields from agricultural production, and due to increased urbanization surrounding the formerly rural area. However, some better news, the farmhouse was built in 1898 and was evaluated to merit designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. It's considered to have design or physical value as a representative 19th century farmhouse designed in the Queen Anne Revival style, and also has historical value for its association with the Biggar family, which is an early settler family in Trafalgar Township, in whose ownership the property lasted from 1854 to 1985, and for whom the house was built. Next slide, please. So the next few slides are before and after the fire and fill were added to the property. So on the left, you can see the image from 2016, showing the relationship between the residents and agricultural structures. So the bank barn, the milk house in the middle, and the drive shed on the right-hand side of the large barn. And then in 2020, unfortunately, after the fire and fill were added. Next slide, please. On the left-hand side, the 2016 photo shows the milk house and its spatial relationship to the former barn and drive shed. Next slide, please. Again, the 2016 photo, this is an image of the west elevation of the former timber bank barn. And then on 2021, the foundation wall ruins and the silos in the background. Next slide, please. This is a view of the northwest side of the barn and its ruins on the right. Next slide, please. This is a view of the east wing of the former bank barn looking towards the north on the left side. And then on the right side, you can see, it not being there, and also the fill piled along the edge of the former farm buildings that exist today, essentially. Next slide, please. On the left is the east facade of the former drive shed, and on the right are the ruins of the building. And you can see the 1898 farmhouse in the background. Next slide, please. So here are a few slides that show some of the property's immediate context. So this is looking towards the southwest, and you can see the milk house on the right-hand side, and the ruins of the burned buildings on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. This is where looking towards the west, and sort of standing on top of the pile of fill, looking at the ruins, and then you can see the farmhouse in the distance, right by 6th line. Next slide, please. This is looking towards the southwest and towards adjacent developments and the William Halton Parkway. And so you can obviously see the mound of fill in the foreground. And then on the right, you can see a little, the rear of the contemporary cold storage and store building that's proposed to be removed. Next slide, please. This is a view looking to the southeast and the Bell Mobility Communications Tower on the property. Next slide, please. And this is looking to the east, where you can see the edges of a pile of fill on the left-hand side and the grading and preparation of future residential developments further in the background. Next slide, please. And again, this is looking north towards Highway 47. So again, you can see the pile of fill in the foreground. Next slide, please. These next two slides are just basically also a before and after from 2015 and 2019, showing the conditions back then. So this is, you can see the immediate context where the agricultural fields surrounding the property are still in cultivation. And this is prior to the fill being added to the property. Next slide, please. And this is from 2019, an aerial image from then that shows the fill, around the edges of the agricultural buildings. So this is prior to the fire. The fire was in 2020, but after the fill obviously was deposited. And so you can see also the fill along the access route to the communications tower, which is on the east end of the property. And then noticeably, the changes surrounding the property are pretty dramatic, with the fields being removed from agricultural use and being regraded for development. Next slide, please. So maybe a little bit of a happier part of the presentation. This is the notice of intention to designate. So as mentioned, the farmhouse was determined to have both physical and historical cultural heritage value, according to the criteria in Ontario Regulation 906. So therefore, it's considered a significant built heritage resource and is being recommended for a Part 4 designation. There are more details on the evaluation based on the Ontario Regulation 906 evaluation, the statement of cultural heritage value or interest, as well as a list of heritage attributes, which are included in the draft notice of intention to designate. That's attached as Appendix D to the staff report that's in the agenda package. Next slide, please. So this is the south elevation of the home. So you can see it's pretty impressive brick detailing on the photo on the right-hand side. And the projecting 2.5 story bay, the chimney, the rectangular windows with the stone lintels and stone sills, as well as the wood framed porch. Next slide, please. This is the rear wing or tail of the property on its on the west side, sorry, the east side of the property. This is assumed to be, or thought of being as the oldest part of the house. It's wood framed. It is speculated to have been built potentially in 1854. So it could even have been the original home on the property. We can't confirm that necessarily, but it does appear to be older than the brick farmhouse itself. Next slide, please. And a view of the north side of the home. So on the left-hand side, you can see the wood framed tail, and then the brick house obviously on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. So because the property is no longer considered to be a cultural heritage landscape, the applicant has drafted a reference plan that defines the area of the property that surrounds the farmhouse, which is noted as Part 4 on the reference plan you can see here. This is where the designation bylaw would be applied, as the heritage attributes of the property are all contained on the farmhouse itself. And they also provide a 10-meter buffer surrounding the farmhouse as well. Next slide, please. In terms of the notice of intention to demolish the remaining farm buildings, so here on the slide shows the images of what would be being removed. So this is submitted because the property is still listed on the Heritage Register. But again, so these are the damaged foundation walls you see in the upper left photo, the cold storage and store building. So this is not of heritage interest. It's a modern building on the top right. And then the milk house on the lower pictures. So the heritage impact assessment does note that while the milk house is a structure of interest, its heritage value is based on it being part of the collection of farm buildings that form the cultural heritage landscape. And individually, it doesn't have sufficient heritage value to be considered significant and to merit designation. And finally, the barn remnants also do not contain significant heritage value in its current condition, as it no longer conveys the function or scale of the agricultural operation. However, it does contain stone and brick that are being recommended for salvage for future commemorative use on the property. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the property at 4243 6th Line is no longer a significant cultural heritage landscape as a result of the changes occurring on and surrounding the property since 2017. And it's recommended to be removed from further implementation of the CHL strategy. The 1898 farmhouse is considered to be a significant built heritage resource as it meets the criteria for designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The remaining farm buildings are not considered to have significant heritage value and do not merit inclusion for designation. And finally, stone and brick from the barn ruins is recommended for salvage for future commemorative use on the property. Next slide, please. So the staff recommendation, again, is that a notice of intention to designate be issued under Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act for the 1898 Glenclair farmhouse at 4243 6th Line, as identified as Part 4 on the draft reference plan that is attached as Appendix C. That the property at 4243 6th Line be removed from any further implementation of the cultural heritage landscape strategy. And 3, that the removal of the remaining agricultural buildings in the property, including the damaged foundation walls and silos of the former barn, the concrete block milk house, and a contemporary cold storage and store building be permitted in accordance with Section 27.9 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Next slide, please. 4, that the property owner enter a heritage easement agreement with the town prior to the removal of the ruins of the former timber frame bank barn in order to ensure that the history of the site is commemorated using salvage materials within any future development of the site. Number 5, that the heritage easement agreement be executed in accordance with executions bylaw 2013-057 and be registered on title to the property at 4243 6th Line. And finally, that the town solicitor be authorized to discharge the heritage easement agreement from title of the lands at the expense of the owner once the requirements in the heritage easement agreement have been satisfied. And that concludes my presentation. We do have representative of the heritage consultants at Stantec here, Laura Walter, I believe, and Josie Lee from Bell, the representative from Bell is also here, who may also be able to answer any questions. Thank you.
Super, thank you, David. I seem to be confused. I've got an Appendix A, I've got an Appendix B, and then it went to B again at the end. So you referenced a C. I've got a D. I went from B to D. I didn't see a C.
I believe Appendix C is the draft reference plan.
Okay, so that's a reference to it. I've got the draft notice to designate, and on the back of that
Mr.
is
Chairman?
this document that doesn't have a page number.
Yes, Mr.
So
Chairman, the
Yes.
appendix label was cut off on the hard copy of the agenda for Appendix C on the plan.
Good. So it wasn't just me. So then if I'm looking then at that appendix, which would have been page 311 if it had had a number on it, that shows the house, and it says Part 4 there, and it shows a piece of property around the house. So it shows the structure, it shows the wood tail building is still there because that's part of the intention to designate, because as you said, it's older than the brick building probably. But that perimeter around the house, what's about 10 meters all round?
It's a 10-meter buffer. Yeah,
Right,
that's right.
right.
Yeah,
So that is what would be designated under Part 4.
that's correct. Yeah.
Good, I've got it. Okay, that was a good presentation, and it's such a shame that because it looked, I mean, we'd seen the barn before way back, and it looked in great condition. I mean, it needs a bit of work, but it looked great. It's a shame that it's all gone now. Okay, any questions of David? Yes, Jerry.
Mr. Chair, I think Brenda may have had her hand up before
Oh,
me.
did I miss Brenda again?
Jerry, you can go.
I can see the yellow hand up in the corner, Brenda. Thanks. Okay, thanks, Jerry. Brenda, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I just have a couple of questions. One, what is the planned use for the home and the surrounding property? First, the area that's marked as Part 4, and then for the larger lot that encompasses Part 3. And I have 4 questions, so.
Okay, yeah, so far there is no definite plan for the house or the property. We do believe that eventually the property will be redeveloped. It is within an employment area in the secondary plan. But at this point, there's no plan. There's no development application to consider. But we if there is at some point in the future, we can see that the home be integrated within any future development. And so we will consider that separately when any sort of development proposal does come forth. But we did want to make sure that the property was designated now to provide certainty for any future developer who they'll know that the property is designated, and they'll have to retain and hopefully adaptively reuse the farmhouse building.
Okay, so my next question is, what are the dimensions of that protected area of part 4? Because it's too small a point size for me to read.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I don't actually know offhand, but I'm assuming it's probably close to 30 with a 10-meter buffer on the north and south components and the house itself. It's probably close to 30 meters, 35 meters, I'm guessing, deep, and then probably close to 30 meters, maybe a little bit less, from west to east from the roadway, or from the property line, I should say.
All right, so approximately 90 by 90 feet,
Yeah.
Okay. And then what's the plan for the maintenance and restoration of the house in the interim until a decision is made?
There's still currently no plan. I mean, the house is currently secured and boarded up. The windows are all boarded up, and so there is no plan just yet. We're assuming that there will be a conservation plan once the property does go for redevelopment at that time. But currently there is no plan other than to ensure that it's secured. And the property is also fenced off as well. So there are some security measures in place.
Okay. Are there any other, thank you. Are there any other examples of milk houses anywhere in Oakville that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. No, we asked Stantec to do a little bit of research on that. And it's determined that there's not, a representative standard for a milk house in Ontario to sort of, to judge the heritage value of this milk house by. So no, there doesn't appear to be a regular form of milk house in Ontario that create a sort of standard by which to judge this one by.
Sue, did you want to chip in there?
Yeah, I'm sorry to just kind of interrupt there. Dave is completely right in that there's no standard form, but we do actually have I believe it's being identified as a milk house at 3451 Tremaine Road, but it's a much earlier example. It's a stone building. It's not a concrete block. It's much, much earlier. So it doesn't resemble this building in any particular way, but I just wanted to flag that as it has been identified as a milk house. And that was designated several years ago before David joined us on staff.
Thank you very much. Those are all my questions for now.
Brenda, I'll keep a closer eye on you as the meeting continues. Okay, any other questions of David or Sue? Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we have a way of helping to prevent what happened to the barn to happen to this building? Especially in light of the fact of, Brenda's question about what is the use of this building. It's heartbreaking to see the beautiful barn building and the other building to be demolished by fire. Like, do we know what the cause of the fire was? Was there an investigation? Is the present owner the owner last year when the fire occurred? Were there any fines or charges laid against people?
I can probably answer the first question, whereas maybe Sue has a bit more of the history of when the fire, happens, and she can help out with that. But yeah, there even was, I think, a break-in. I might have been around 2018 in the farmhouse, and some windows were broken and so on. And then at that point afterwards, it was secured to the state it is now, and that's hopefully to prevent any more trespassing into the house. But also the property has also been fenced off as well, and to add a level of security to hopefully prevent any further trespassing onto the property in itself. It may be difficult. I mean, this property is there's not many sort of eyes on the street close by to this property right now, because it's still, the neighboring area is still under development. So you don't have a lot of neighbors there, unfortunately, to sort of, keep a lookout. But the owner, Bella, has secured it to an extent where, it should prevent any further, vandalism of the home, and of course, any future fires. In terms of, maybe Sue, if you want to jump in, you can help out about the fire itself and the
Sue?
fallout.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Dave. And I'm not sure if Josie would like to add anything to this in the end or not, but the fire that happened last year was unfortunate. There was no investigation completed by the fire marshal that was determined because there was no loss of life on the property. The cause of the fire is unknown. It may have been started by someone in the area who shouldn't have been, but it is almost equally as likely that it was a combustion of the flammable elements inside the barn just on their own, because it was still quite full of old hay, and that's certainly not unknown to happen. The property was fenced at the time, and I actually, in communication with Josie's predecessor on this particular file, there were actually people on the site that day doing, I believe, hydrological testing. And so the site was appropriately secured and fenced off at the time, but I mean, securing a barn is pretty much impossible. And so Bell certainly has upped the security measures on the site since that time, including boarding of the property in accordance with the property standards bylaw and the additional fencing installed around the barn ruins in order to ensure that no one gets into that area and harms themselves when they shouldn't be on the property in the first place. And so hopefully that provides a little bit of context. We don't, there doesn't appear to be any kind of malicious intent with the barn fire. It does simply appear to be an accident of some type.
Thank you, Sue. I was just going to ask as well, two things. One is, will they be installing a camera to monitor the house and monitor activities around the perimeter of the house? We've heard of incidents where the houses have been taken in for nefarious activities as sex trading or whatever. And the other question was, who authorized the fill? Did the owners know about the fill on the property?
So Dave, I hope you don't mind if I take this one as well. Is it?
Yeah, I was going to maybe ask you.
Predates your
great, thanks.
Involvement on this one.
Sure.
So we can certainly ask Bell if they have any additional security measures that they'd be willing to implement on the site. I would say that, Josie, and we'll make sure we get to you, I promise, or the chair will certainly, but we do also undertake kind of, it's maybe less regular than it used to be, but various kind of drive-by inspections of our North Oakville properties, especially the ones that we know to be vacant. And this one actually is pretty much to and from my way to work. And so I drive past it on a fairly regular basis to just kind of take a look to make sure that everything's still boarded the way that it should be. But we can actually try to get out there more regularly if needed. In regards to the fill, that was done without the knowledge of the property owner. It was even done without the knowledge of the tenant of the property. It was done by a subletter of the tenant of the property, and there were no permits issued by the town for that fill either. And so before the barn fire, the town was in talks with Bell, who unfortunately, as the property owner, are on the hook for the removal of that material on the site. And they had completed their environmental testing to ensure that it wasn't hazardous materials. And we were in the process of getting a plan in place to get it all off of the site, because there's a number of kind of shale-like rocky mixture, as well as a giant hill of soil debris as well. And so once the fire occurred, especially given the placement of that material in proximity to the ruins of the barn, the kind of the remediation efforts there were halted, but the fill was not done with the permission of the town or the property owner. And it's my understanding that the person actually responsible is currently incarcerated for other issues at this time. So it's a long and strange story.
It is. It is. We'll get to Josie, I guess, is going to speak for the applicant.
It's
or
11
the
o'clock.
property owner. Are there any other questions though before we do that of David? Okay, none. Okay, Josie, I don't know if you wanted to say anything. I don't know what kind of security there is around the cell towers. I mean, if some person gets it into their head that it's a 5G tower, which we all know is causing COVID, then they're going to want to blow it up. And is there any general level of security around cell towers?
So if I may address the group, Mr. Chairman. In respect to the question around security on the site, Bell Mobility does take security very seriously. And with respect to cell towers, we do have those fenced off so as to avoid trespassing from the general public. With respect to this site in particular, we do have regular patrols that are sent by the area to check for signs of break-in. And we have been investigating the putting on a camera or some other surveillance monitoring on site to ensure that the property is secured. With respect to the cell tower itself, so generally speaking, those are monitored for any disruptions in communications. So if somebody were to damage the cell tower such that it was no longer transmitting, there is a central operations center that does monitor or look out for those interruptions. But with respect to the heritage property itself, yes, in addition to the fencing and the boarding in accordance with the town's bylaws, as mentioned by Susan, we do send out regular patrols. If any of our folks are driving by the area, they know to keep an eye out and take a look on the site. I hope that does help to address some of the concerns around security and what Bell Mobility is doing. I would suggest that perhaps the best way of deterrence is putting the property back into productive use. I think one of the other folks mentioned that area being under development. There's not really any neighbors nearby to keep an eye out. And so that's also a challenge as well.
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But it's going to be employment lands anyway, so it's not going to be residential housing nearby. Okay, any questions of Josie? I know I was surprised. I hadn't driven up that far up 6th Line in a Coons Age, and I was astonished at the amount of development that has taken place up there. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, obviously our councillors would know all about that, but I hadn't driven up that far, right up to 407, and it's amazing just how many new houses have been built up there. It's a whole new community, and it will be employment land. So the hope is that people will be able to walk to work, perhaps. Okay, any other questions of the applicants? Okay, seeing none, it's confined to the board now. Any other general discussion? There are 6 recommendations in the in the staff report that sort of detail the process of taking it off the cultural heritage landscape, permitting the demolitions, and I guess most importantly for us, the intention to designate the farmhouse. So would somebody like to give me a motion on that? Perhaps Brenda would like to raise her hand now that I'm looking right at her. And would you give me that motion?
Well, I had one more question.
Oh, well,
Or
go ahead with the
not
question.
a question, but a concern. Just
Yeah.
that I am worried that this house is going to end up stranded. We've seen other properties that end up like this. We've discussed several actually in the last 6 months, where the property ends up being so small that to fit in driveways, to fit in access to the employment lands and other things, they actually end up impinging almost right on the home. And I'm concerned that the space allowed in this Part 4 element will not allow for proper reuse of the property and protection from any surrounding development, such as there's going to have, if this is an employment area, there's going to be further buildings, further parking, further access. And I'm not satisfied that the space allocated is sufficient to protect the property and allow for useful restoration of it.
Okay. David, Sue.
I can try to answer this one, and David might assist me, but to be very honest, I fully expect that we will in the future be looking at an amendment of this designation bylaw as part of the relocation of the structure to be better incorporated into a new development on the site. The current location of the house is actually very awkwardly located due to the on-ramps to the 407. And it's, you know, it's not ideal from a heritage perspective because the house is largely hidden from the viewpoint. And so you know, it's my understanding that Bell themselves are not intending to develop this property and that they would be looking to sell. Maybe Josie has some additional clarification if I'm incorrect about that, but having the designation bylaw placed over Part 4 of the reference plan gives us the opportunity to ensure that whatever happens to this house in the future, that it is properly relocated with enough land around it. And I'd say we've learned from our past mistakes. And so the 10-meter buffer that's you know, proposed to be the designatable boundary right now, I do expect will change in the future as we look at incorporation of this into a new development so that it's more of the focal point of the property in some way. And so I guess I'm not concerned about the lack of space around it because I don't think it will stay where it is anyways. I don't know if anyone, David, if you have anything to add.
No, I think you pretty much covered it all. No, that's great. Thanks, Sue.
All right, Brenda, this is a step. We're getting the Part 4 designation on the house. That gives us a lot of insight and influence into whatever happens later. And I think that's the important thing, whether it's, it is probably not going to be a family home again because that's employment land. So, but at least it's been designated and the structure itself will have an adaptive reuse perhaps, but that's down the road. But having it Part 4 is a really important first step for us right now. Are there any other questions, Jerry?
Is there an opportunity to include in the recommendations a couple of points? And one is that in the unfortunate event that there should be another fire to the building and that the building gets badly damaged, that the expectation would be that there would be a full reconstruction of the building to bring it to its historic state. And the second, that before removing the designation on the property, that on the landscape, that a full documentation of all the farmstead buildings, photographic and otherwise, be made by the owners prior to that designation on the landscape and the outbuildings being removed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So maybe you could pick up the second one first, because we've got the full heritage report. I mean, is that you need more than that, Jerry?
Just a photo documentation with the idea of plaquing should the house be moved to another location, so that the story and the history of this property is maintained in a graphic format in order for the community in the future to be able to view it in whatever setting, new setting it would be transplanted to, so that there is the continuity of the historic story.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I would just note that in 2017, there was actually an incredibly thorough evaluation report prepared by the town's consultants. It was Laterno Heritage Consulting, and they had full access to the property at the time. So we actually have at least a 100-page report that shows the property kind of back in its not in its glory days, but certainly in a better form than it is now, with extremely detailed photos of the interior and exterior of the buildings that have now been lost, as well as the buildings that still remain on the site, including the interior spaces of the farmhouse and the milk house too. So I do think that we actually have sufficient documentation to ensure that commemoration is thorough for the property in the future, with the addition of the Stantec report. In regards to your suggestion for the first option, the committee can make whatever recommendations to council as it wants to, obviously, but I don't think that would be included in the staff recommendation, because we always look at individual circumstances kind of for the future. So in terms of requiring a building to be rebuilt after a complete fire loss is generally not something that we've looked at in the past in accordance with heritage conservation principles. This is David's report. He can certainly speak to whether or not he would want that kind of amended to the staff recommendation, but I think it would have to come directly from the committee to council and not as part of the staff report. David?
Yeah, thanks, Sue. I was thinking, well, the property will be, hopefully designated, and then it'll be subject to heritage permits, so heritage permit review. So if any circumstances do come up that impact on the physical state of the building, we can always review that then, and it will come to the committee at that point. So I don't know if there would be any really benefit of including that now, because we will have, say something the house does become damaged at some point, we will have opportunities in the future to look at that, and we'll be able to consider the context of what does happen at that time to see how much of the house is damaged and so on, and is it repairable, can it be reconstructed and so on. So we can look at that through the heritage permit process.
Yeah, and just to go back to the second point, with respect, yes, I think we have lots of documentation around the house. But Jerry was also saying, can we sort of include in the easement agreement that whatever happens to this property, there will be some kind of plaque or storyboard or something that we can actually physically incorporate whatever happens to it. We know it's not going to be residential, but whatever happens to it, so that there's a description that people can see, a couple of pictures, whatever, but of the context, where the house came from and how it comes to be here. So I think that part is something that I could see us perhaps writing in, but leaving with you, Sue, to make sure that appears in the heritage easement agreement, because that commemoration we've done before, and I think it would be important to do now. On the other issue, I'm not sure if perhaps the councillor can tell, I don't know if the Heritage Act or the Municipal Act even requires that if your house burns down, you have to rebuild it. You may have to put something there, but to rebuild in kind, I don't think you could do that. I don't think you can force that. If it burns down, it burns down. And you've now got a vacant lot, and you deal with it in accordance with the zoning and the planning, and that's that. So I don't think we can force them to rebuild. But I do think that we could pick up on the storyboard idea, the plaque, the commemoration. would that be enough for you, Sue, to hear that and to get that in, or do we want to say that the heritage agreement, blah, blah, be registered on and include appropriate commemoration? I mean, can we add that in?
That's a standard part of our heritage easement agreement. So David and I can make sure that that certainly happens. Yes.
Good, good, good. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. Councillor Dedek.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps to be of assistance, Councillor Giddings and I can raise the issue that has been discussed here today at the council level, where we have the benefit of legal counsel to advise us as to what can and cannot be done, rather than putting our staff in a position to answer something that they'll invariably have to go to legal for anyway.
That would be very helpful, Kathy. Thank you. It's kind of where I was heading with this, because I just don't think we can do it personally, but then what do I know? But certainly picking up on the plaque, the commemoration of the lost property, I think that would be something that any new developer would want to do, because that would add to the value and attractiveness of the whole development. Okay, is there any other discussion? Now, Brenda, I kind of put you on the spot, but that was kind of jokingly. But if you do want to move the motion, we'll take it as moved by you.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair.
Good, thank you. Okay, so we've now got the motion on the table. We've talked about it. Are there any further items of discussion on that motion? Okay, we'll call the question. Anyone opposed to the motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. So thank you very much, everybody. That was a good discussion. The next item, and thank you, representatives from Bell. Nice to see you again. Right. We have information items. We have a confidential committee membership listing that has been sent to us. That's the only information item. Can I have a confidential motion to receive the confidential item? Thank you, Councillor Dedek. Anyone opposed to that motion? The motion is carried. The date and time of our next meeting is Tuesday, December the 14th. Not sure what's going to happen around Christmas this year, because we had to miss going down to the Queen's Head last year, which was unfortunate. I don't know whether we're going to be able to go there this year. We'll just have to wait and see how the restrictions and requirements play out between now and December the 14th. So motion to adjourn from somebody. Thank you, Bob. Motion to adjourn. Nobody's opposed. Thank you again, everybody, for the gift of your time. It's been great to see you all. See you in a month.